Remember, no matter what the label says, you can eat anything at least once. Hey kids, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Uncle Frank, hoping that you are having a great day. And in today's video, we are going to be sitting down, relaxing, and having a conversation about the longevity of the various TCGs on the market. You see, yesterday or the day before, I forget, I was listening to Jared over at Decks and Dice LLC, who is a store owner who rambles about a lot of the same things I ramble about. Actually, go ahead and give his channel a watch if you have the time. And he was positing the question on whether or not TCGs could be generational. And I'm not going to go over his entire video here. This isn't really a response to that video so much as it is just kind of my own follow-up thoughts to it, in essence, because that video got me thinking a bit about how certain TCGs can or can't survive based on their ability to bring in new audience members and their ability to kind of persist after their initial, I don't want to call it fad, but after their initial wave of popularity. It's basically a fad. And, for the big three TCGs, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon, and Magic, it's kind of hard to imagine them kind of falling apart and just fading from popularity in any real essence. I mean, if you look at kind of the growth of these TCGs over the last 20 years, and there has been some significant growth if you're paying attention. It's kind of wild to even contemplate the idea that, things aren't going to be this way forever, and eternal growth isn't sustainable. And sooner or later, those TCGs, especially the biggest ones out on the market right now, are going to reach their maximum player count. Nobody can predict when that will be. Nobody will be able to predict when it will happen, what that number will be, or even how fast the decline will be after that number happens. But this video isn't about the failure of a TCG. Instead, it is about the long-term survival of TCG models, both in terms of player interest and in competitive viability. You see, when a company is considering making a new set for a card game and continuing official tournament support for a card game, one of the biggest things they consider is purchasing. That is, specifically, how many people are out there buying the card game. And if a card game is hemorrhaging players, hemorrhaging buyers, a lot of the people who are designing the card game, they're going to be thinking about not designing the card game. That is, the corporate stiffs in the upper echelons, they're going to go and consider their balance sheet, the book numbers, all the cost of production, all that jazz is going to go into account. And they're going to run those numbers against the current player count and their sales numbers. And they're going to give long, hard thoughts about whether or not it's even going to be worth it to continue printing new sets. And believe it or not, how good a card game is not directly tied to whether or not it continues. More often than not, a card game dies simply because not enough people are buying it for a company to consider it worth continuing. We see this all the time with some of the out-of-print TCGs on the market, where there just wasn't enough interest, either because it was pulled elsewhere or because the game itself was just not great. Now, when it comes to long-term sustainability, like I said, it's a truck. Was it a truck? Whatever, doesn't matter. Like I said, it's hard to imagine a future where the big three, Magic, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, it's hard to imagine a future where they are not still dominant, but a little bit of a reality check. Sooner or later, things do change. And I would love to tell you that tulips are forever going to be worth the value of a house, but fact of the matter is markets change and the interests of people change. Now, whether that's going to be in 5 years or 50 years is anyone's guess. But let's just address some of the ways that a card game can do its best to survive for as long as possible, to maybe not continue to grow its player base, but to maintain the player base it has, and to bring a fresh flow of new players in and keep them to the game for as long as possible. The biggest way, I think, and we're going to approach all three TCGs because all three of them do something really good, I think, in terms of allowing for new players. So option one is to make your cards as readily available as possible so that tournament play can continue for, maybe not in perpetuity, but it allows for meta decks to kind of thrive. And Yu-Gi-Oh! Does this really well with its extremely aggressive reprint policy. I mean, if you've never played Yu-Gi-Oh!, if you've never played Yu-Gi-Oh! Competitively, you might not be aware of it, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks, Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards, part of the reason they devalue so aggressively weeks or months after release is because everybody knows that there's a reprint coming, and those reprints are usually very heavy. Very rarely does a card or deck stay the rarest and most expensive card or deck in that game, because Konami is so very aggressive with making sure that those cards are readily available. Now, there are problems with how Konami handles their reprints and how they time them, and I'm not going to get into that here. That's not what today's video is about. But the fact that they are so aggressive with their reprints, way more aggressive than Wizards of the Coast is with Magic, it makes for an ease of access that a lot of the other games don't have, because unlike Pokemon, which is a rotational game, and unlike Magic, which has its formats, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is an eternal format. Every card that's ever been printed in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is up for consideration when you consider your deck for the newest metagame. So the fact that Konami will reprint every card in their catalog into oblivion really does make for an accessible game. And that's one way you can appeal to newer players. Now, the inverse of that is that there is a lot of complexity in Yu-Gi-Oh! And a lot of the cards printed these days are 30 bazillion lines of text with rules upon rules and effects that can't actually happen. There's the whole missed timing thing that blows my mind every time I think about it. But, that's just one way. Option number two is to do what Pokemon does. And what Pokemon does is, Pokemon is the most recognizable IP on the planet. You want to appeal to new players, you want to get more people into your game, well, you can achieve that by being the biggest name in the business. There is not, with the exception of uncontacted tribes or people like the Amish who don't do the internet, I don't think there's a group of people out there where if you grabbed 10 people and put them in a room and all asked them whether or not they've heard of Pokemon, I think it's impossible to get a room of 10 people at random and all 10 of them haven't heard of Pokemon. Barring the exceptions, like I said. Pokemon has massive generational growth because every child who has parents who grew up on Pokemon is going to have parents who want to show their kids Pokemon. It's just a fact, and there are going to be parents with, grandparents. There's people who have grandkids now and they're being shown Pokemon. It's crazy. And there's a lot of appeal for that because not only does Pokemon have a bazillion episode anime, a manga, the video games, all the movies, but the TCG kind of helping to tie it all together by giving people regular access to new releases for an IP they care about. And a lot of that is the collectability of it, because there's people who have their favorite Pokemons and they're going to go out and buy the new sets just to get a hold of their favorite cards. And not everybody who's buying Pokemon cards is in it just to play the game, obviously. A lot of them are just in it to collect or to invest. But yeah, Pokemon has a very strong brand identity, and that helps them kind of keep going, regardless of any issues that are going on or perceived to be going on. Pokemon really is just quite the juggernaut in the industry. And like it or not, name brand recognition can take you very far, especially if the core mechanics of your game and the core accessibility of your game, core accessibility, not current existing aftermarket accessibility, if the core accessibility of your game, and by that I mean the decks themselves, if you want to build a deck for Pokemon, the decks are cheap. The actual playable cards, most of them are very affordable. You can build Pokemon decks for very cheap. Okay, that's what I mean when I say core accessibility. I'm not talking about the price of a booster box. I'm talking about the price of singles here. Yeah, well, you combine that accessibility with the brand name recognition that Pokemon has, the big old Pikachu face, and you've got something that is going to appeal to a very wide audience. Now, what does Magic do, right? What does Magic do that is possibly helping it chug along the most? Well, Magic has formats out the wazoo. Regardless of what you think about Universes Beyond, or the health of Standard, the health of Modern, the health of Pauper, the health of Vintage, Legacy, Commander, Tiny Leaders? Do people still play Tiny Leaders? I'd imagine not. Regardless of what you think about the price of cards, the reserved list, etc., the lore, the company, regardless of your misgivings about anything regarding Magic the Gathering, the fact remains that if one format is bad, or even if multiple formats are bad, people can very quickly jump to just another good format, one that's enjoyable. Pre-modern, old school 93-94, Commander, Modern, jump to Pauper. Pauper's playable right now. Magic has longevity not because it is the best card game on the market, and I do think it is one of the best card games in the market. No, Magic has longevity because of the sheer variety of the game and the kind of built-in options players have when it comes to how they choose to play the game. Not just in terms of deck building, but in terms of the kind of formats they are allowing themselves to be involved in. Because, you know, let me tell you guys a fun story. I hopped into Magic the Gathering right at the start of the Tarkir block, okay? And after several months of getting my butt stomped by Siege Rhinos and Wingmate Rocks and all that wonderful jazz, I started playing some Modern. Because I was like, Standard is awful, I'm going to play Modern. And I got my butt whooped in Modern. And I went, Modern is awful, I'm going to play some of this EDH that I've been hearing so much about. I built an EDH deck and I started having fun there. You know, when you're not having a great time in one Magic format, you could easily jump to another one. And the sheer depth of the card pool that Magic has available, because like Yu-Gi-Oh, it has a massive card pool for some of these formats to pull from. Magic has the ability to bring in new players who are curious to try all sorts of different formats for the game, especially the ones like Commander that have mass appeal because it's the ultimate in casual friendly formats. And of course, there is the overall tournament appeal behind Standard, Pioneer, and Modern, and things like that. But really, the big draw for Magic is just the pure variety of it, and the fact that as one of the oldest TCGs on the market, as the big old TCG on the market, there's a lot going on with its card pool that brings a lot of variety to the kind of decks you can build regardless of the format, which is just nuts for a lot of people to take in. I remember hopping into Magic after Yu-Gi-Oh! And being absolutely blown away by just the variety. Now, how can other card games integrate these practices? Well, you know, I don't think every card game is going to be able to pull off a Pokemon. I don't think a lot of other card games have the ability to be the big name in the room. So take that off the table. But making cards available, that's a good way to get people playing your game. And allowing for variety, that's another good way to get people playing your game long term. And you have to do it, you have to find the right balance. You can't just do what Yu-Gi-Oh does and print cards into Oblivion. The printing cards into Oblivion is a little bonus for what Yu-Gi-Oh's got going on, you know? Establish yourself, and then find ways to entice new players into the game over and over again, whether that's be a new type of card every few years, or a brand new format every few years, a game overhaul every few years. That's been tried by a few card games. There are things that you can do to bring in mass appeal to your game. And I don't think that there's been like a science to it. I don't think there's like any one way that works best. Because what might work best for Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Pokemon isn't necessarily going to work all that great for, let's say, Weiss Schwartz or Neopets. Just putting that out there. But there is a lot of value in seeing what does work for other card games and using that to estimate kind of how that can be extrapolated into the lifespan of other card games. I just realized that sentence doesn't make a whole lot of sense. What I'm trying to say is learn the lessons that other card games have kind of presented, whether they are current ongoing ones or dead out of print ones, and take those lessons and apply them to what kind of card games you're trying to evaluate in terms of longevity. And you can kind of guess which ones are going to stand the test of time. And I'm not going to do that in this video. I'm not going to talk about the other card games that are on the market and my thoughts for how long they're going to stick around. But I am going to say, if you look at what works and then compare it to other card games that are fresh and new in the market, you're going to make some guesses. And sometimes you'll be right. Sometimes you'll be right. But I just wanted to ramble about that for a bit. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, like, share, subscribe, all that jazz. And I'll see you guys in the next one.